Welcome back to the channel. We have a special guest for you tonight going over the topic of mental fitness, thriving in a bear market. I'd like to introduce Karen Ivison to you. Karen, welcome back to the channel.
Thank
Glad to
you.
have you back.
Thank you. Glad
And
to be here.
Karen, guys, has a master's in psychology. She's a certified life coach, and her full-time job is a mental fitness coach. And in this bear market that we are in, there's a lot of people struggling. I hear it every single day. I know Karen hears it not just in trading, but in just many aspects of life. So we thought it'd be good to have her come on and give you guys a presentation. So this is mostly going to be her prepared remarks for you guys, and I think she wants to do some Q&A with you. If you have other stock talk, regular market stuff, there's going to be another one of my normal late night live streams in about 90 minutes. So without further ado, Karen, tell us a little more about yourself, and then I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Tony, and thank you for having me. The kind of my backstory, how I got into this mental fitness about 6 months ago, I was in a, almost daily kind of panic related to work where I was just overwhelmed by just how much I had to do. And so I was on LinkedIn and I found this positive intelligence coach grant program. I was accepted into the program, did their 6 week the program with the app. And what I found is that the things that I was putting together, both not only my own life, but through not only my bachelor's, but my master's, and then what I was experiencing with some of my clients, I had all these random puzzle pieces and I was figuring out how I saw that they all fit into this program. It's done wonders for my stress level. So I used to be a stress eater. I was about 176 pounds at one point at my heaviest. And I learned how to stop stress eating, but I didn't come up with another means of dealing with my stress. So that's where I was kind of having that daily struggle with it. And I knew I needed to find something. So that's how I got into this program. I am referencing, the 6 week program. For everybody tonight, that's just the reference for where I put all these puzzle pieces together. You're not going to get a sales pitch. This is me sharing what I've learned so that it can help you, especially because, like Tony mentioned, I'm seeing it in the community where everybody's stressing out about this bear market, especially with where AMC is at the moment and how many times we have thought that this regulation, that thing, was going to trigger the MOAS, and yet here we still are sitting here. So that's why I reached out to see whether or not we could put this together, and we did. So mental fitness, in a nutshell, is learning to improve the percentage of time that your mind is serving you as opposed to sabotaging you. And so throughout the presentation tonight, I'm going to be referring to saboteurs and sage and self-command. And the saboteurs and sage are really what the positive intelligence founder, it's the labels he gave to be as generic as possible. He didn't want it to get into any kind of a Buddhist or Christian, like you can get into those names very easily. And so he picked these names to be as generic as possible. He has his doctorate, and the research he did is his original research. And so what he found was that there really are 3 core mental muscles that can help you thrive in challenging times. And the definition, the way he defines the mental fitness, is your capacity to respond to life's challenges in a positive rather than a negative mindset. And so as that relates back to the investing, is that right now, as we're in a bear market, all we see is the negative. So what we want to do is to get into the positive, and how can we learn from everything that we're going through so that we can make better decisions further on. The impact is, a peak, improving your performance. And this can help you make clear-headed decisions to help develop a peace of mind and a wellness, so that we're not looking at our mistakes as a tragedy, but we're looking at it as an opportunity to learn. And so his research started with looking at positive psychology, performance science, neuroscience, and cognitive behavioral psychology, and synthesized, everything that he could find as the framework, and that's where he developed the positive intelligence. So we have our normal intelligence, we have our emotional intelligence. So now he's branching that off with now positive intelligence. And so like I said, he synthesized those 4 areas. He tested this research on CEOs, on students at Stanford, where he was getting his doctorate, on athletes, on participants in 50 different countries. And he also used, because he's a part of the Young Presidents Associate organization, YPO. So he's a part of them. And so he also took it to them as well. And so he put this actually all into a book called Positive Intelligence. So everything I'm going to talk about tonight, he talks about in that book, and he also has all of his reference materials in there as well. So what he found with his research is he used factor analysis to take everything down to the core. Just like we have, the 3 root colors are red, blue, and yellow. We have all the prime numbers. You can't take it down any further. So he applied that same type of research analysis and found that there are the 3 core mental muscles, and that's the saboteur interceptor, that's the self-command, and that's the sage. And so the saboteurs really are how we get in our own way. That's that negative self-talk that we have. Primarily, it's the judge. That's that inner critic. That's who, what's the, beats us up when we make those mistakes. It's, when we figure out that we're over leveraged in a particular stock, like me, at one point, my AMC, I was 83% of my stock portfolio, not where I wanted to be. And if I'm in that saboteur mindset, I'm going to be making a panic decision instead of a well-thought decision. Another example is if we're, we see that there's a stock running up, and then we find ourselves chasing the stock, just like Tony tells us not to do, or getting our hopes, that, what Adam Aaron's doing is going to be that catalyst. And there's a balance to, yes, it could be a catalyst, but if you get your hopes up that this is a catalyst, then what happens when that catalyst doesn't happen the way we want it to? So that's where we want to recognize when that saboteur is showing up in our lives. So not only does we have the judge, but there's 9 different co-saboteurs, accomplice saboteurs, depending on your style and your motivation type. It's kind of a lengthy, but I'll give you a brief rundown. There's the controller, somebody who needs to be in control of their circumstances. You have the hyperachiever who puts too much stock in what they're accomplishing. Restless, you're not satisfied in whatever you're doing. You're constantly trying to get to do something different. The stickler, where it's similar to the controller, but it's different in that everything has to be done a certain way. It not necessarily is that you're controlling it, but if there's like an operating, a procedure manual, it has to be, you think of things in very strict terms. You have the pleaser, who another one that that I battle with, and that is, you're trying to make another person happy, and you're sacrificing your own standards in the process. Hypervigilant, that is where you're trying to you're looking at everything from a worst case scenarios perspective. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, with any of these if you take it to an extreme, because most of these are your strengths taken to an extreme. So, going back to my hyperachiever for a second, there's nothing wrong with achieving things, but when you put too much into what you're achieving, now that's when it becomes a problem. The avoider, if you want to avoid conflict, there's a time and a place to take on a situation. But if you never take on a situation and you end up being unhappy as a result, then that's when it becomes a problem. And then you have the victim. I think most of us are familiar with the victim side of things, and then the hyper rational, which overanalyze everything. So that's a brief rundown. It is, if you wanted to see where those show up in your life, you can actually go to positiveintelligence.com/resource. And if you scroll all the way down, it's a free assessment. You just put in your email address and they send you the results, and then you can kind of see how that, like I said, shows up in your life. So we have the saboteurs and we have the sage, and they live in different, or they reside in different parts of your brain. So the saboteur really is our survival mechanism. It's our fight or flight. It serves a purpose because we need that, particularly ancestors needed that, when they were faced with a dangerous animal. We don't have necessarily that quite to the same degree, but at the same time, it can happen. If you're at the grocery store and somebody robs the place, that's another area where that would show up, and you would be in that survival, survival brain. On the other side is the sage, and that's where our empathy is at. That's where our creativity is at. And so the goal is to recognize, and sometimes there is a value to the saboteurs if it's, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute, but we want to move from that when we recognize it and then get into the sage. So the motivations behind our survival mechanism is fear, and it's stress, and it's anger, and it's guilt, and it's shame, and it's insecurity. And that's where I'm seeing some of that show up as we're dealing with, the stock market where it is, when it's a bear market right now. So the stock markets aren't going where we want them to. And so, like going to, me and that over leveraging into AMC, but that's the situation I'm in, and it can cause stress. And then there's a fear. What if I lose my money? But that's when you get into the stock market and you get into investing, that's something you have to recognize that it's, that's possible. And you have to be willing to assume that risk if that's what you want to, if you want to get into this. So with the saboteur, you can get to success, using those motivations when, you're beating yourself up, to motivate yourself to do better. But while you may have that success, it's not going to generate happiness. If you really want to do your best and achieve happiness, that's where the sage comes in. And, let's just say for a second that we have the MOAS, we all have that life-changing amount of money. There's actually research, and I'm going to be doing a post about it on my social media and on my blog about arrival fallacy. There's only so long that happiness from an event will last. Eventually, we're going to go back to our baseline. So the trick is to learn how to be happy on a daily basis and where you're at. So the question then may come, are negative emotions good for you? And yes, they are, in the same respect that pain is good for you. If you put your hand on a hot stove, it's going to hurt, and we're going to get our hand away from it as fast as possible. And the goal really is to use emotions, negative emotions, the same way that we use pain. So negative emotions are helpful, ideally for only a second, but that's getting to the black belt levels, if you're going to put it into a martial arts kind of context. Whereas as we're starting out, we're white belt. I'm, after having gone through the program, I'm really only a yellow belt. So it's still, I still have a long ways to go in getting into this, but I enjoy what I'm learning. So staying in negative emotions really does hurt our ability to see things clearly. Because then we're moving into a panic mode. And so when somebody makes, well, the MOAS hasn't happened yet, so I'm going to sell all my stock. And that's like a snap judgment decision that we're making that you could end up regretting long term. What's better is to really evaluate your situation. Everybody has to, as Tony has said probably 100 times ad nauseum, I'm sure it feels like, you have to know your trading plan. You have to know when you want to get out, and you have to understand where your limit's at. So you have to, so for me, I know that the shorts haven't covered. I know they keep kicking the can down the road, but they haven't covered yet. I know that AMC is in the process of building their fundamentals. I know that Adam Aaron has more, far more stocks than I do. So the decisions he makes impacts him as well. And so I use a lot of that thought process to really think through what my exit strategy, when I get to the point is. And as I get more information, then I reevaluate. And so that's thinking things, seeing things clearly. And then also we want to get into that empathy and that, and it's starting with empathizing with yourself, because we all make mistakes. We're imperfect. Nobody gets it right all the time. I remember when I jumped on the Tesla bandwagon, timed it perfectly, but hey, I got this investing thing down, and then made a bunch of mistakes and learned very quickly otherwise. But it's all about getting to, that clear-headed so that you can make a good decision.
Yep.
So as we get into Sage, that's the part of the brain where our positive emotions are at. That's where our peace and calm is at. That's where we're able to make clear-headed decisions, and that's where we're able to be creative. And for those of you who think you're not creative and you can't think on that side of the brain, it's actually not true. You're just not practiced at it yet. If you practice, it's like mental muscle is just that. It's you can build and develop that muscle every bit as much as, somebody who goes to the gym and starts lifting weights. They don't go in there lifting, 100 times their body weight. They have to work up to, what they're, they have to work up to it. So the Sage starts with the Sage perspective. And that is every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift and opportunity. And this is actually a perspective I've had for a long time. I want to say, even in my 20s, I took that perspective of every situation I'm in, I can learn from it and I can grow from it. I raised my kids to have that perspective. So it was really awesome to come in and see this perspective in here. And that really does apply to the stock market. Every single thing we go through, we have the ability to learn, okay, well, when I make a mistake, all right, well, where did I get off track on that one? Or when I did something, all right, where did I get that right? And so that I can duplicate that in the future. Everybody starts at the beginning. Everybody's, any new skill, any new hobby, any new anything, you all have to start at the beginning. Tony started at the beginning. All of us start at the beginning, and you have to learn. You can't compare yourself to somebody who's been doing this. I know Tony's been doing it for 30 years. You can't compare yourself when you're just starting out to that. So you have to give that. That's again where the empathy comes in. This is a learning process, and we're all here in this community to learn. So I will say, so going back to the Sage perspective, I do realize that there's extremes that people can look at it from, and it would be really hard to see the gift and opportunity from something, that's really, the loss of a loved one. There could be extremes. And so the goal when you're learning mental fitness is not to start there. It's to start with the easier stuff. And I feel like learning that in the stock market in this community would be a good place to practice that, especially when you've got people here who can help you along the way. And so, and it's another thing to think about too, is that you're not taking something that's good or bad. You're kind of taking out those labels. It's, even though something is a tragedy, saying that, applying the Sage perspective doesn't take that tragedy out of it, because you can still, there can be a gift that can come out of it. When my aunt got sick, I went to go, I kind of dropped everything because I knew she wasn't going to be going home. So I went to go visit her, and it reminded me not to take life for granted, not to leave anything left unsaid. And so I had taken on a theme for the following year to live without regrets. because we don't know how much time we have. And so that was what I took out of it. It still hurt that I lost my aunt. It was still a tragedy that I lost her, but I found something I could use to live a better life as a result of that. So that's what the sage perspective really is all about. And Shirzad uses the stallion story. I don't know if any of you have heard that story before, but I'm going to briefly go through it. So it's the story of a farmer who lives on the farm with a teenage son, and he has this beautiful stallion that he enters into a contest. The stallion wins first prize, and so all of his neighbors come up and they say, "Congratulations!" And he says, "Well, who's to know what is good and what is bad?" And they looked really confused at him, but they went on their way. And the next week, some thieves came and they stole the horse because of this increased value. So then the neighbors came to him again, and they commiserated with him, and he said again, "Who's to say what is good or what is bad?" Several days later, the stallion breaks free and he comes back to the farmer, and he brings a few new mares with him. So once again, the neighbors all come up to him and said, they congratulated him, on his good fortune. And he once again says, "Who's to say what is good and what is bad?" While his son is riding one of the new mares, he gets thrown off the mare, and he fractured his leg. And you guessed it, neighbors come up to commiserate with him, and he once again says, "Who's to say what is good and what is bad?" The following week, it's a very eventful village. The following week, the war breaks out, and the army comes to get all the able-bodied men to fight in the war, but they can't take the son because the son's got a fractured leg. The neighbors don't even to come and say anything to him because they know what he's going to say. Who's to say what is good and what is bad? The point of that is what seems like a bad thing can lead to something good, and vice versa. Because if you look at how that story progresses, the next thing that happened builds off, it is the opposite, but builds off the prior event. So the question then becomes, which perspective is true? And you guys can answer this one in a second. Is it true that everything is bad, or this bear market is bad, or is it true that it's a gift? And so I'll actually let you guys answer that.
Yeah, while y'all are typing in your comments, I I love that you asked that question, Karen, because you might have heard me say once or twice, like your future self, if you can find the right stocks to invest in right now in the bear market, and you have the spare coin to do it, your future self is going to thank you for buying in the lows of a bear market. You just got to have the patience and
It's
the
hard
willpower
to
to see it through.
It's really hard to buy in a bear market.
It is.
I've been in a spot, this is my third time where most of my investments have been in the red. So I know we're going to come out of this, but at the same time, it's hard to know, okay, well, is this really the bottom? Who knows? So the answer to the question is whatever you believe is what will come true. Your perspective is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe that the bear market is bad, then it will be. If you believe it is a gift that you can learn from, then it will be. And so that's the biggest takeaway. So the question then becomes, how do you get from that saboteur mindset into a sage mindset? And we do this with called a positive intelligence repetition, or PQ reps. And really it sounds mindfulness and meditation based, but it's noticing your physical sensations or physical senses and letting go of the thoughts as they come in. It can be done as simple as rubbing two fingertips together and pay attention to, how the ridges feel. Sitting in your seat, noticing how your seat feels as you're sitting there, or as you're walking, how your feet feel, or listening to the bird. I've never noticed the birds so much now that I do this while I'm walking. And it's interesting because I'll be at a different spot and I'm noticing something else and I don't hear the birds at all. But then I get to that point where, because sometimes I listen to his guided meditation, PQ reps, and all I'll hear is the birds, and it's really kind of cool. So the goal is to recognize when you're in that saboteur mode, when you're in that negative mindset, and then to do PQ reps as little as 10 seconds. But I actually try to do first thing in the morning, 12 minutes. Does my mind wander? Absolutely. That's a part of the learning process. And so a lot of times what happens, especially when somebody's learning mindfulness or meditation, they realize that their mind's wandering so much, they go, this isn't for me. I can't do this. And the reality is the more you practice, the better you get. It's no different, again, going back to the gym reference, or even going back to maybe even cardio. When you start out, you might only run 12-minute miles, but then the more you practice, the better you'll get. So this really all comes down to four things. And so everything that I've talked about really culminates into the very simple operating system. When you feel those negative emotions, stop and recognize that you're in saboteur mode. Do some PQ reps to quiet. And you could even relabel that, when you're in that negative self-talk. Do some positive intelligence reps to quiet the negative self-talk and to get into that sage mode. Stop and realize that every problem that you're dealing with, every struggle, every challenge can be used as a gift and opportunity. And then you want to generate that gift by thinking about the empathy or the curiosity or the creativity to get you into that clear-headed action. And so is it really possible to get from a saboteur to a sage response, even in tough challenges? And the answer is yes, but how long it takes you depends on how strong your mental muscle is at the time that you're going through it. So I'm getting better at catching it, because it's right before I left workers' comp. I had a injured worker's wife call me and berate me for not being more attentive. And unfortunately, there were circumstances where I didn't know she was trying to get a hold of me. They had changed my phone extension, so I wasn't getting the phone messages, and they didn't have me as the examiner in the pharmacy program, so I had no idea that there was something pending. But that sounded like a bunch of excuses to her. And I remember it took me about 3 hours before I recognized, and that, sitting in those negative emotions way too long. So skill comes with practice. You guys can hear what I'm talking about tonight, but insight only makes up for 20% of a lasting change. Practice is where change really occurs. So if you're not going to do anything with it, then nothing's really going to be any different. If you want something different, you have to do things differently. So my goal and the program goal is to practice the PQ reps 15 minutes a day. And if you get that going for about 6 to 8 weeks, it becomes more habit. So that is my presentation. And if you guys have any questions, be more than happy to answer them for you.
All right, guys, if you have questions for Karen, drop them in the chat. I'll try and she can see your comments in the chat, and I'll try and pull up. Karen, if you see one you want to answer, let me know. I'll put it up on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I like that you talked about allowing yourself to make mistakes and learn from them. That is probably the most problematic thing for me. Why I always am looking for new things to challenge myself with. Like, what was it? 10, 12 years ago, I took a couple of acting lessons in the evening down, adult education classes. And yeah, you suck when you first start trying to learn how to do something, unless you were born with a gift.
Yep.
And, I got over that fear and applied the knowledge. And I went from an F-rated actor to a D-rated. But then I kind of stopped doing it because it's a lot of time for no pay. But I moved on
Right.
to taking dance lessons, and god dang, man, I hate making mistakes, and that was really difficult for me because the first few months, that's all you're gonna do is make mistakes. But now I'm proficient, and that is one of our favorite social activities. But by extension, that goes
Mhm.
into investing or getting better at your career, learning a new skill for your job. You guys got to, like Karen said, be willing to challenge yourself, make mistakes, and then learn from those.
Absolutely. So I see
I still
bliss.
struggle with that.
It's
Cliff?
and because we hold ourselves to too high of a standard, and that kind of gets into another aspect of psychology, where you have your actual self, your ought self, and your ideal self. So your actual self is where
Mm,
you're actually at. Your ideal self is where you think you should be, and your ideal self is, I'm sorry, your ought self is where you think you should be, and your ideal self is, in a perfect world, this is where you think you should be. And we all know we're not at the ideal self, but where our ought self and where our actual self are at, the bigger the gap, the harder it is for people to deal with when they realize that gap. Um, when you become aware of that gap. So, and that's I think sometimes what trips people up is that they're holding themselves to where they think they ought to be, um, but part of that is not recognizing that they're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be at the level that other people are at. And
yep.
everybody is more knowledgeable about something than the person they're talking to. I wholeheartedly believe I have something to learn from everybody I talk to.
Do you have any recommendations for people like me or anyone in the chat that just like struggles with, you get into something new and you want to be perfect at it? Like, let's just say dancing, whether you're learning
Mhm.
two-step or waltz or salsa, you want to be really proficient right away because you want to go have fun and apply that. But how do you teach yourself to be patient with the process of learning and accepting that you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that maybe you might be embarrassed in the beginning from those mistakes, or even, not happy with yourself? Do you have any recommendations or
That's
thoughts?
I do that. I would put that into recognizing where I'm being overly critical to myself, and even as short as 10 seconds of doing that PQ rep, and then getting into that empathy for myself. That would be the sage power, in particular. I think that's the one most of us need, empathy towards ourselves. I think that's the one we should practice the most.
And
If you find yourself,
how do we apply that to investing?
it's when we make that trading mistake, recognizing that we're learning and then getting into that. Okay, so in a perfect, if I was 100 years old looking back, what would I have done differently as a result of the knowledge I just gained? And then you can apply that knowledge to the next time. And so it's stopping and taking a look at, all right, what would I have done differently, on this side of the mistake, what should have been done? And then now that you know that, now you apply that to the future. For example, don't put 85% of your stock investment in one stock. And making sure it stays, diversified. Um, but I got into that, um, that hopium that was, um, right around the corner. So, and then I wanted to get back to bliss. No, I do not. I mean, not much into astrology. I'm more or no more than just knowing my um, that I'm a Sagittarius, and uh, you know occasionally I see that and see where my my astrology horoscope is for the day.
Guys, do you have any questions for Karen about how you can apply some of what she talked about, or if you're just joining in, do you have any questions for her on maintaining your own mental health, your own mental balance, your own mental fitness in this difficult bear market. No matter what positions you're in, everybody has some that are doing okay and many that are not doing okay, depending on when you bought. And we want to help you. She wants to help you figure out how to either learn from that or be okay with that while we get back into the next cycle. So if you have questions, throw them up on the screen and I'll get them up for her to answer. Juicy says, I'm trying to look at a fuck up more as, well, that's not the way to do it. Yes.
That's the beginning of it. And then building on that is, how would I do it differently? You know, recognizing how not to do it's one half of it, but recognizing how you would do it if you had to do it all over again. You know, it's almost entertaining that. I call it my do-over wish list. We can't do life over, but if we did have the ability to, how would you do it differently so that you can learn from it and grow from it?
Karen?
Yep. All right.
I don't know if he's being humorous or if that's really happening to him, Broke Ape.
Oh, okay. Blowing up your, I wasn't sure if it was social media or if you were talking about the investing, but I get, yeah, investing account. Laughing at it wouldn't really do you much good. You can kind of do that in the initial, kind of de-stress, but then it gets back to, what are you going to do to learn? And that's really the point I wanted to come on here and talk about. It's one thing to make a mistake. It's one thing to recognize the mistake, but then the goal is to learn from it. And that's one of the fundamental, gifts and opportunity that you can take from any situation is, what can I learn from it and how can I grow from it?
Yeah, that was one of the lessons that I learned early on. And a lot of people find my style of investing boring because I don't YOLO into every, I don't YOLO and then roll that into the next YOLO and then roll that into the next YOLO to try and turn 1,000 into 500,000 in 3 weeks. Like, I'm more risk balanced, have investments in different segments because I made those mistakes early and young and they were painful mistakes and I don't want to repeat them. So, yes, guys, I don't want to, you're free to do whatever you want. I mean, if you have unlimited liquidity to just keep on adding into the market and blowing up your account, that's one thing, I guess. But most people don't like having to start over. So spreading those investments in different segments, different types of investments, different stocks prevents one mistake from blowing your account up. But I get it. I get the temptation of why people do it. We all want to get rich tomorrow, right? What are your thoughts on that, Karen? This pervasive, especially 2021 with crypto blowing up and the government handing out money like candy and a lot of stocks blowing up. I think maybe some people might have learned some bad habits. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. And that's where I'm going to do that post probably tomorrow on arrival fallacy. And, with that foundation of, let's say we do MOAS, that doesn't mean your happiness is only going to be short-lived. You're eventually going to come back to your normal. And so you have to treat money, when, if you do hit it big, you have to treat it the same way you do now, or you treat it now the same way you would do, when you made lots of money. But know your plan, plan now. I mean, you can think now, and I heard that when I was getting ready to start my business. Run your business now like it's going to be when it's fully booked. And there's sometimes where you don't always know, what things come up, but as you come into different situations, well, what happens if this blows up? How do I want to handle that situation? So it's kind of, that same mindset of, okay, well, let's say I do have lots of money. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to make sure that I don't, waste it? And end up broke and back to where I am before, because there's research that lottery winners, they end up just as broke as they were before they won the lottery. So
one of my biggest fears is if, one of these plays that people are invested in pops off and they make a lot of money, that there are going to be some, just like you were alluding to in your earlier example, that are going to try and roll all of that into the next play. And because you get this God complex or
yep,
infallibility. You
yep,
believe that, you can never make a mistake, and that
right,
there's going to be people that come into a lot of money that immediately lose it. And I've seen
yeah,
that happen with other investors on YouTube over the past several years.
yeah,
So yeah,
definitely, it's
guys,
very easy to do.
I'm going to put Karen's socials up here one more time if you want to follow her on Instagram or Twitter. And
And so
Karen,
I saw Proud Mama had a question about grounding
yeah,
in the face.
let me see if I
So if
can
we want
find
to
it.
put that, I wanted to get back to that.
Got it.
Cool. Because it's easy to do. That goes back to the PQ reps, and it can be it goes back to noticing your physical senses. It can be anything, anywhere. You could be in the middle of a conversation and you're focusing on the person's eyes. You're focusing on their face. Or you can just have your hand down a little bit and doing those, rubbing your fingertips together, or noticing the breathing, which is where I think mindfulness really starts from, is just noticing your breath. So those are, because all of that, if you're focused on the senses, you're not thinking, and that's what gets us out of that negative mindset. That's what gets us out of freaking out and panicking. So that's what I had to, because I started this when I was still on the tail end of my workers' comp career, which is very caseload based, and it's how much can we put on your shoulders before you break based, which I know a lot of corporations still do. So it was so easy for me to feel overwhelmed. I had too much to do. Half of it, I wasn't even sure how I was going to do it. And so instead of dealing with it, I was in panic mode. And so I wasn't getting any of it done. So it's kind of, that's where I get, I do those PQ reps, and then I get back to, okay, what's the very first step I have to do? Even if it's, I need to find out from my supervisor or another person at work, how exactly am I going to do this? And, being okay with admitting that, you don't have the answer to it. We
For
all
those
have
that
things to
joined
learn.
in, for those that joined in late, can you just give a 30-second recap of what a PQ rep is in your vernacular?
It is noticing your physical senses and letting go of thoughts as they come in, and they will come in. So rubbing your fingertips together, noticing the temperature of air as you breathe in, noticing the birds, or like me, I have tinnitus. Sometimes I'll notice the ringing in my ears. Um, as I'm on a walk too, noticing the cars as they drive by. So it's paying attention to your senses, and as a thought comes in, just let it go and get back to, whatever sense is most noticeable to you.
What other questions you guys got for Karen? Rarefied Tennis says he's doing okay on his sports bets.
I can tell you right now, if you want a good betting strategy, find out who I'm rooting for and bet the opposite.
or become friends with Super Steven,
Right?
who runs market maker activities for sports betting. All right, Karen, I'm going to give folks a few more minutes to get questions in. Do you have any closing thoughts for the folks tuning in tonight?
You're welcome to reach out to me either on YouTube, on my social media. If you're in Tony's Discord, on Discord, I love helping people get to a better place. That's my passion. It's why I got into coaching. Because the thing I noticed I've got law enforcement, I've got military, I've got, the corporate world, all these different, and workers comp. I loved being able to help my injured workers get better. So um, I love that connecting with people, and I love having dynamic conversations. So by all means, reach out. Love to have a conversation and help me see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being a member of the Discord also, because sometimes you have a skill set that I don't have in helping talk people through that stuff. I mean, I have my limits of what I can say, but it's you're a good calming voice for the people that are feeling stressed on any given day in the Discord. So I
Thank
do
you.
thank you for that.
And I appreciate that, and I love having that place to do that.
Here we go. Ape Nation says, do you see the physiological aspects of apeism as flawed or detrimental to investing? Ooh, that's a deep question.
Interesting. All right. The physiological aspects of apeism.
Or maybe the psychological aspects more than
Psychological.
physiological.
I think apeism has brought a community together that would not have otherwise come together. So, say what you want about whether or not, and I know there's a question in there, whether or not I think AMC is a good play. If I knew then what I know now about, how this was going to go, would I have gotten into it? I would not be as leveraged as I am. I would have been smarter about, my percentage of my portfolio. But at the same, the gift out of all of this is I'm now a part of a community I would never have been a part of had I not gotten into AMC. And so I don't see, the whole apeism as flawed or detrimental. I see it as a place of support and encouragement and learning. Because then that gets back to we learn a lot from Tony and the people that on that we can take that into the future. And long after AMC and this whole thing is done, however it happens, I'm still going to be a part of this community. I feel more at home and comfortable with this community and having conversations with you guys than I do, anywhere else that I'm in right now. So, and Angelina, yes, I have 2 kids. They're both grown, 22 and 20 next week or this week, end of this week.
Might be interesting at some future date to have you and my oldest son on. Maybe we can come up with some topics. He's finishing up his PhD in psychology.
Oh yes, that would be fun.
And he's actively, working, doing counseling and stuff. But I'll talk to him about that next time I talk to him.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
All right, guys. Last call for questions. Proud Moss says apeism is a word.
It is now.
It is now, yeah. My guidance on that, and I'm no psychologist, although I've run into a few crazy people in my life, is it's good to get caught up. I mean, it's fine to get caught up in a movement or a moment, but you still have to, I generally recommend to people to have your logical side keep you in check, and like your emotional side should not be your investing side. You got to develop your logical side and say, okay, I'm excited about this play, but what is the risk? And let your logical side dictate how much of an investment you make, not your emotional side. Does
Right.
that make
And
sense?
that's,
So that you don't over leverage into one thing. It's
yeah.
that
And that,
balance
that
of
logical
emotion versus
side,
logic.
that
Go ahead.
logical side really is that sage perspective, whereas the emotional side, especially the negative emotional side, is that saboteur side where we end up self-sabotaging because
Yeah,
we're
I
not
think
making things with a clear-headed focus.
it's almost like if you're totally an emotional trader, uh, your emotional self can turn on yourself really quick if you screw up, right? And if
Hmm.
you don't have your logical
Absolutely.
side as like the little angel on your shoulder, you go from being super hyped about something to thinking the entire world is conspiring against you because your emotions flipped, and that's the only piece of your brain that you're using.
Exactly. And that's the trick, is recognizing we're in that and then doing something about it, silencing that negative self-talk, and getting into that logic side, right? What do I do, so with me, like, what do I do with where I'm at? Well, as I have money to invest, I'm putting it in other things, so that I'm not quite so leveraged. So
Yep. Ape Nation says, I don't recall anyone talking wild, crazy ideas like market manipulation or anything. What are you talking about? Like 2 years ago or before 2 years ago? I'm not sure what the comment is. One good thing that, even for me, that I've learned over the past couple of years, I always knew that there was manipulation and, shorts paying people to go in chat rooms and things like that. But and I know always, that institutions or hedge funds are going to operate within the gray areas of the law to get an advantage. They're always going to manipulate the
mhm.
system to the extent that they can legally. But one of the key things that I've learned over the last 18 months is the depth and the depravity. It goes far deeper than I ever imagined. So it'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
how this all plays out. But
It,
as Karen and I have talked, and others on the live streams before, some of that comes down to if you want to fight that battle, we can all choose to fight that battle, and I am in this stock. But for the rest of your investments, you got to understand for the moment the field that you're playing in, and
right. And you have to,
who's controlling the levers so that you don't make every investment a battle. Like, take some wins, take some easy ones.
right. Right. And it's, we talked about that briefly too. It's learning how to play with the rules that you're forced to deal with right now. Yes, do we want, things to be more fair? Absolutely. Um, but just complaining about the corruption doesn't do anything to fix it. And I know there's some, we've talked the mass awareness days that they're going to go to the SEC and protest. You know, and we've talked about, if that's how you want to try and affect change, awesome, go for it. You're doing something productive. But that's where just sitting there and complaining about it doesn't do anything to fix it. You
And
can learn how do you take those wins, with the rules that you have to play by right now.
just to be clear, you're not saying that doing a protest is sitting doing nothing. They're actively doing something,
Yes,
and we
right,
all
and that
I think I think we all appreciate that and support that. Do what you need to do to make yourself feel better and
absolutely
show that you're doing something.
right. And however you want to take action, obviously within legal means. um, but even if that's just learning the system, learning how how you're best going to um, win in the stock market that we have at the moment. Being that it's a bear market, that's what we're in right now, and that's where like we've talked earlier. The dip. it's hard to buy the dip, but this is the time to buy. It's, but it sounds easier. Just like it sounds easy, it sounds easy to take your emotions out of it. But when it comes to actually doing it, that's why I wanted to help give people at least a tool to do that with and learn.
Yep. All right, Karen, thank you again for your time tonight, guys. I'm going to put her socials up here one more time, and feel free to follow her on Instagram or Twitter. It's totally free. And I'm sure she'll have some little tidbits of wisdom, and you can reach out to her with questions. She's also in my Discord, and I have my regular, Sunday night. This is our Sunday night, right? Because today was a holiday in the U.S. Our
Right.
regular stock talk live with Smokes and Bourbon will be on in about 30 minutes. So I hope to see you guys back. I'm going to eat a quick bite of food, and I will be back in 30 minutes. Karen, you're free to join in if you're free.
I will be. I'll be there.
And once again, I do appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge with the folks. And guys, if you got value out of this, hearing from Karen, or you have other topics that you'd like to hear her talk about, since it's her area of expertise, drop them in the comments of this video once we finish up, so that they're
Absolutely.
there forever for us to go look at and for her to go read.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate you, and
Thank
I
you.
will see you back on my channel in about 30 minutes.
All right. See you soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.